We will start now, Gary. I hope you're all right. Okay.
Yep. Yes.
Right. Good evening to all of you. Let me welcome you to this webinar series that we are having. Today, the topic is strategy management with a strategy map and its balanced scorecard. And we have as our guest speaker, Mr. Gary Cookings, CPIM. So let me welcome you first, Gary, and we are very happy that you are here with us today. We also have our special guest today, Dr. Callum, who is the director of the Postgraduate Institute of Management, the leading business management school in Sri Lanka. So welcome, Dr. Callum. We are very, very happy that you have been accepted our invitation. And let me also wish you well in your new post that you have taken over as the director of the PIM, or the Postgraduate Institute of Management. Then we have our council member, Mr. Ruchira Pereira. And of course, we are expecting a few more of our maybe special invitees. They should be here. And we have our CEO, Mr. Damita Narangudu, present here, and our members who are present in large numbers, and other participants. So as I said that today is another webinar that we have organized, and as you all know that due to the current situation that we are in, we have been able to go into the digitalization, and this is something that we have really, it has enabled us to make a lot of changes. The CMA Sri Lanka recently, we updated our syllabus and made an interim revision, bringing in the digitalization. And when I say digitalization, it's not only the theory, but also the practice. So in fact, someone who has greatly assisted in this is present here today, Dr. Callum, as I mentioned earlier. So we are very thankful to the members who assisted us in updating our syllabus. Now, today's topic of strategy management with a strategy map and its balanced scorecard. Now, I really told Gary that we would like to listen to the balanced scorecard, because that's something very, very important. So he has linked it up with the strategy management and of course a strategy map. And finally, where we can use the balanced scorecard, and of course, depending on the score, you will be able to know whether you are excellent, good or medium, fair or bad. So that's the purpose of this balanced scorecard. I'm sure Gary will be able to tell us more details. Now, as you know, Gary Cookings is an internationally recognized expert. He's a good, one of the most excellent speakers and an author in advanced cost management and performance improvement systems. He's the founder of analytics-based performance management, an advisory firm located in Cary, North Carolina, USA. And you all know that we have been able to recognize the great services rendered by Gary to the management accounting profession, and CMA Sri Lanka granted the fellow membership to him. So we are very happy that we've been able to do this to someone who has really played a very, very major role in the last 4 decades, I think, and also associating some top people like Robert S. Kaplan and David Morton. So David Norton, and who have been really involved in the balanced scorecard. So thank you very much, Gary, once again. May I now invite you to make your presentation. And as you said, we will, anyone who has any questions can send it through the chat or the Q&A. And after the speech, we will also have the expert comments from our special guests. And thereafter, we will take up the question. Over to you, Gary.
Well, thank you very much, Lakshman. It's a privilege to present again. I think this is my 4th presentation webinar within the last year. There's my email address. If there's no time to answer questions. The audience is welcome to directly email me at gcokins@garycokins.com. Also, in my website there are many free downloadable articles, no charge, that you can get the links or the PDFs and read from them. Oh, there we go. Yeah, started to freeze. I'll add a little bit more to my bio. Thanks, you, Lackman. Yes, my undergraduate degree was in industrial engineering and operations research at Cornell University. I received my MBA at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. If you are doing the math, I am 72 years old, but I feel like I'm 42 years old. My career was in, I think, really 3/3. My first decade was with a large manufacturing conglomerate here in the United States, FMC Corporation. Then for about 15 years, I was a consultant with Deloitte, KPMG, and then Electronic Data Systems, which is now part of Hewlett Packard. And then up to 8 years ago, I was 16 years with SAS. Many don't recognize who SAS is, but SAS is actually the world's largest privately owned software vendor, 15,000 employees, specializing in data science and business analytics. There's a reason those books are there. I think careers have much more to do with luck and circumstances than being smart and competent. I had a lucky break. In 1988, KPMG struck an exclusive contract with Harvard Business School professor Robert S. Kaplan. We'll talk about him because he did the development of the strategy map and balanced scorecard with Dr. David Norton. But before that, he did the pioneering work on activity-based costing. So I got recruited to KPMG from Deloitte. I was trained by Professor Kaplan. For 5 years, I implemented it. And then I wrote a book, and that led to more books. And that's the explanation why there's books. And I'm not promoting the books. You don't need to buy them. In fact, don't buy the books. If you go to Wiley or Amazon, chapter 1 is a free download. That'll give you a good overview. So let's get going. Who will benefit from this presentation? Managers who have previously struggled at promoting financial planning and analysis, corporate performance management methods, including the balanced scorecard, which is one of the many methods of CPM. Managers who intend to champion any or all of the improvement techniques, and they need a compelling call to action. And the reason I have champion in quotation marks is because it's been my observation that although it's nice to have senior executives sponsor new ideas and innovation and progressive methods, often they are preoccupied with firefighting and short-term priorities. It's typically managers 1, 2, 3 levels down in the organization chart who are sort of passionate and ask themselves, how long do we want our organization to continue to perpetuate using stale or arcane or ineffective methods? And they're the ones that will do a proof of concept or pilot and demonstrate to their coworkers and the executives above them, this is the way to go. So if you're 3, 4 levels down on the organization chart, that's fine with me. I like lecturing to you. I start all my presentations with this cartoon, drowning in data, but starving for information. You have this poor beleaguered clerk, sad, shoulders hunched, and the books all around him, paper all around him. And the supervisor in the doorway to the left is asking him, it looks like you've got all the data. What is the holdup? I gave you the request this morning. Why don't you have the answer this afternoon? And I think the message here is there's a difference between data and information. Data tends to be transactional, detailed. You convert the data into information to gain insights to make better decisions. I also start my presentations with these 3 questions. What, so what, then what? So imagine you actually implement any of these corporate performance management methods, including balanced scorecard. I say celebrate for 1 day. You are not done. You're going to see much more information about your organization that you've seen before. So that brings in the question of relevance. So what? But arguably the more important question is then what? Because all decisions impact the future. And that's where we get into sort of the driver-based budgeting, rolling financial forecast, what-if scenarios, and the like. And one of my previous webinars for the ICMA Sri Lanka was on this topic, but this one we're going to talk about the strategy management. Before I get going though, here's my agenda. And some of you who have attended my previous presentations, I'm going to repeat some of it, but that's okay. I think it's reinforcement. I want to basically clarify the confusion and lack of consensus about what is corporate performance management and the pressures that have caused interest in it. That'll take me 6 or 7 or 8 minutes, and then we'll dive into the main topic, the strategy map and its associated balanced scorecard. I do want to talk about a challenge with organizations, the difference between key performance indicators and just operating performance indicators. Then at the end, I'm going to bring it all together, show you some diagrams, how it all fits together. And then I'll conclude with a real concern that I have, which is why is the adoption rate for all of these methods so slow, and what are the barriers preventing it? So let's get going. There is confusion and lack of consensus about corporate performance management. Is it human resources performance management? If you actually just do a Google search on the term performance management, you will get the human resources and personnel department, employee appraisals and the like. But that's a subset. And the problem is authors like me, we forgot to put corporate or enterprise as the adjective before it. Is it about scorecards, dashboards, key performance indicators, and measures, and the alignment of employees with the strategy? Yes, and that's what we're going to talk about throughout this presentation, but that's just a subset. Is it about process, productivity, and quality improvement? Yes, but that's also a subset of CPM. This is commonly referred to as business process management, the area of lean management, Six Sigma quality management. Or is it all the above and even more? And the answer is. And the good news is this. The corporate performance management methods, which I'll describe in just the next slide, are not really new things that managers have to learn. Many of you have already read about them in magazines, or you're familiar with them from other organizations that have implemented them. The problem is when organizations do implement them, they implement them in isolation of each other. So you may have the strategy planning people in one part of the building. You have the profitability people in the other part of the building, the pricing people in another part of the building, the risk management in another part of the building, the process improvement in the other part of the building. And the point is this, you get a lot more power and synergy when you integrate all of these various CPM methods like gears in a machine, and even more power when you embed into each of them analytics of all flavors, regression, correlation, clustering, association, the tools of the data scientist. So because you will receive a PDF of these slides, what I just described, the definition is here. Corporate performance management is the integration of multiple methods with each embedded with business analytics, such as segmentation, but especially and the primary purpose is to achieve the strategy of the executives and make better decisions. And we will be talking about achieving the strategies. Now, many of these methods have been around for decades, some even before computers. So what has caused interest in corporate performance management? Well, let me take 2 or 3 minutes and describe 8 forces. The first one, which is the topic of this webinar, is the executive's frustration with strategy failure. Most executives are very good at formulating the strategy. Their big frustration is the failure to execute the strategy. And there's much empirical evidence on this. There's a recruiting firm from Chicago, and incidentally, I'm a Chicago native, go Chicago Bulls. The young people know Michael Jordan, great basketball player. They monitor the involuntary turnover of CEOs in North America, and it has been increasing every year, firing of the CEOs. And I believe that what the reason is post-Enron, board of governors, board of directors no longer take their role as ceremonial. If the executive is not executing the strategy, they're terminated. Carly Fiorini with Hewlett-Packard is a good example. Number 2, increased accountability. Today, there is no place to hide. You will be monitored. You will be measured. It doesn't necessarily mean employees and managers' jobs are at risk, but it could adversely affect their salary increases or job promotions. 3, more rapid decision-making. Unlike years ago, when you could test and learn, have meetings in conference rooms, today, people will be on the phone, go or no go, yes or no. They have to make the decision in real time. They almost wish that an executive was sitting next to them during the phone call so they could ask them, what decision should I make that aligns with your strategy? 4, mistrust of the managerial accounting system for transparency and accuracy. Most line managers and employees do not trust the management accounting system. They know it's flawed and misleading because of those overhead allocations spread like butter. And then again, in one of the earlier 3 webinars I've done for the ICMA Sri Lanka, you can hear my talk about measuring profitability using activity-based costing. 5, poor customer value management. The reality is customers are the source of value creation for shareholders and owners. We need to connect them. And that means the CFO and the accounting department needs to calculate and produce not only profitability for the product gross profit margin line, but below that, including distribution channel expenses, marketing expenses, selling expenses, cost to serve expenses. They need to create a profit and loss statement for each customer. 6, contentious budgeting, poor resource capacity planning. Again, in one of my 3 earlier presentations, I talked about this. My message was the annual budgeting process is broken. It's such a disaster. It's out of date in a couple of months after it's published. It has all sorts of other problems. I said the solution is stop budgeting. But that creates the question, what was the purpose of a budget in the first place? And in that webinar, I basically describe a way using corporate performance management methods that you can actually get driver-based budgeting and driver-based rolling financial forecast using cause and effect relationships. 7, dysfunctional supply chain management. The issue here is typically customers treat the supplier as the enemy. Let's just negotiate lower prices with that supplier. If we put them out of business, so what? We can get another supplier. That has got to stop. It needs to be a marriage of all the trading partners up and down the stream of a supply chain. Supply chains compete for other supply chains for the share of wallet or purse. So they need to basically find mutually beneficial projects and initiatives that'll save money for all the parties. And finally, 8, unfulfilled return on investment promises from large IT systems like enterprise resource planning systems or customer relationship management systems. And the message here is if you ask a chief information officer 3 years after they've begun the long journey of implementing a large ERP system, how well do you think the return on investment from your implementation has met or exceeded the return on investment that software salesman sold you on 3 years ago? And many of those IT managers and CIOs will be hard pressed to say yes. That does not mean you should not have implement the ERP or CRM. You have to in order to remain competitive. But the issue is that ERP systems produce lots of data, but not necessarily information. And what the corporate performance management methods do is it converts that data into the information to create the return on investment, like growing seeds from the ground. So now the presentation, I'm going to talk about the first one, the executive frustration with their well-formulated strategy. Again, the executives are quite good at formulating strategy, or they'll bring in high-end consulting firms like McKinsey, Booz Allen, my alma maters, Deloitte, KPMG, Price Waterhouse, Ernst & Young, and the like. But let's look at this cartoon first. A hacker broke into our system and found out our corporate strategy. Did he post it on the internet? I would like to read it. I'm also curious about my objectives for this year. Do you have the guy's email address? And the reason I have this cartoon up is because what Kaplan and Norton, they're the creators of the strategy map and balance scorecard, realized is that most managers and employees do not understand the executive team strategy. So for example, if I walked into your organization and randomly interviewed 15 employees in the hallway and asked them quick, 30 seconds, can you articulate and explain your senior executive strategy, how many of them could do it and do it well? Probably none. Well, what's the consequence? Well, if managers and employees do not understand the executive strategy, then how do we expect them to understand what they do each day, each week, each month contributes to executing the strategy? So that was one of the two big reasons Kaplan and Norton basically pursued the strategy map and the balanced scorecard. And to confirm and validate this, here is a survey of executives' biggest concerns. Look at the number one at the top, executing the strategy, the topic of this webinar. So how did I learn about the balanced scorecard? Again, I was very lucky here. I'm explaining that in 1988, I was recruited to KPMG, and there's a photograph of Professor Kaplan, the co-creator with Dr. David Norton. But his major book in the 1970s, Relevance Lost, The Rise and Fall of Management Accounting, really basically put management accounting much more onto the visibility of people. And I want to make a quick point. There's a difference between external financial reporting for statutory and regulatory compliance and internal management accounting that's used for insights and decisions. And Lakshman and the others, I've said this, my big concern with India and Sri Lanka and the Asian countries, too much emphasis on external financial reporting. It's an imbalance. You need to shift more energy towards management accounting, because statutory reporting, all it does is valuation. What's the value of inventory? What management accounting does is it creates value by basically providing better information for insights and decisions. Now, here is a series of books written by Kaplan and Norton. The last one, Execution Premium, kind of summarizes it all. And then there's a couple of other books by a colleague I worked with, Paul Niven. So again, these slides will be in your presentation. So let's talk about the strategy map and the balanced scorecard. In this diagram, you'll notice that in the ellipse to the left, the strategy map arrow is going into the balanced scorecard. I'll explain why that direction in a second. But above the two is something arguably more important. It's the vision and mission statement. That must come from the executive team. That's their job. Their job is to set the direction for the organization. Their job is to answer the question, where do we want to go? But what the strategy map and the balanced scorecard answers is a different question. How will we get there? What are the projects or initiatives to accomplish the objectives to basically align with the strategy? What are the core processes that we're not doing very well that we need to improve? Now, many organizations allegedly claim they have a balanced scorecard. And when I ask them, oh, you've got a balanced scorecard, do you have a strategy map? They say no. That is wrong. This may surprise you. The strategy map is arguably 10 times more important than the balanced scorecard. The balanced scorecard is just a feedback mechanism. The real power, like the GPS in your car system, the intelligence is in the strategy map. The strategy map and scorecard are mechanical. They're one of those many gears in the machine of all the corporate performance management. They help realize the vision and mission of the executives. Now, what Kaplan and Norton basically created with the map are these 4 perspectives that go from bottom to top relationships. So we start with the learning and growth. These are called perspectives. It answers the question, how will we sustain our ability to change and grow? When they're accomplishing those objectives, they'll contribute to the internal process ones. Where must we excel with our business processes? For accomplishing those, then they'll contribute to the third one, customer perspective. How should we appear to our customers? And then collectively all the way to the top, the financial view. If we are succeeding with our strategy execution, how will we look to our stakeholders and shareholders? Now, here's a quick primer on a strategy map, very high level. The second reason that Kaplan and Norton created the strategy map is they recognized that executives were overreacting to financial results reported at the end of the fiscal period. they said you need to shift your attention more to metrics, measurements collected during the period, and basically then, do corrective actions, and that'll take care of the shareholder value, the financial results. So in the map, each of the rectangles is what's called a strategic objective, typically 2, 3, or 4 for each perspective. The arrows are the key performance indicators, the measures. You get what you measure. If you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. If you cannot manage it, you cannot improve it. So here is a fictitious example of a strategy map. Again, 2, 3, or 4 strategic objectives in each of the 4 perspectives. So again, if the employees at the bottom, learning and growth and innovation, are accomplishing those, they'll contribute to the internal process objectives. So think of these arrows like aligning the behavior and priorities of managers. Think of it like in the Olympics, the crew, the team that gets the gold medal, all of the rowers and the crew are in sync. The ones that don't get the gold medal, some of them are not in sync. The ones that don't even qualify, people are growing in different directions. So to summarize, a learning environment will stimulate process excellence. Process excellence will lead to customer retention, satisfaction, loyalty, intimacy, and that will then create the financial value. In case some of the attendees are from public sector government, I just want to make a point. All of the corporate performance management methods can converge and be used in the public sector, just like in the commercial sector. Some public sector government people say to me, "Oh, I don't want to listen to you, Gary, because government is not a business." And I say, I disagree with you. I grant you 2 things in government. You cannot select your customers, and your goal is not to make a profit. What else is different between you and commercial companies? You all have limited resources. You have to use them in ways to basically accomplish things. So for the government, basically the strategy map, they just flip the top 2 perspectives, and in place of maximizing shareholder financial wealth, it's maximizing the community value for citizens. And again, if you're interested, quickly, here is an example of a strategy map from a European Treasury organization for government. Next case, learning environment stimulates process excellence, that leads to financial governance, and that creates the citizen value. Now, here is a simple example of a strategy map for a United States Airlines called Southwest Airlines. You may have heard of Southwest. There's similar ones in Europe, Ryan. These are these low-cost, low-price airlines. And in the very beginning, 30 years ago, Southwest Airlines only had 3 jets. They were at the very startup of their organization. And what the executives realized is we do not have enough money to buy a 4th jet, but we need a 4th jet so we can basically grow the business. And what they asked themselves is, well, when the jet lands on the ground, it takes the ground crew 1 hour to basically change the plane and get the passengers off and the new ones on. If we could do that in 15 minutes, not 60 minutes, we could basically go faster. So here's how the map looks at the bottom. We start with the ground crew aligning to the strategy. What that means, this is like an Indianapolis 500 car, pit stop. They have to fill the gasoline fuel into the plane quickly. Also, the flight attendants do the cleaning of the aircraft, not bringing in contractors. So the other objectives then is they need to develop the skills to do that. Well, that will then contribute to the internal process, fast ground turnaround, get it turned around in 15 minutes, not 60 minutes. And if they're accomplishing the 15-minute turnaround, look at it contributes to, they can offer customer lower prices, which means they can attract more customers from competitors. The flights basically have more cushion. They can attract more customers. And then that all contributes, look at to the top, increased revenues and sales, lower operating expenses, profitability. See, it's a cause and effect relationship from bottom to top. Now, I'm not going to describe this diagram. I just wanted to have in my slides a few examples. So after my presentation at your leisure, you can kind of look at them and draw some insights. Here's a second one of an automotive plastics company. Again, you can read these at your leisure. But now I want to show you an interesting example of a friend of mine who implemented a strategy map for this company. It's called Frederick. What he did is he took the annual report. You're all familiar, the annual report, always at the very first couple of pages will have the executive team's summary of the year, a bunch of paragraphs. So he took that and he said, well, I'll take words and text from those paragraphs. Profitable growth, I'll put that there. Great service, I'll put that there. Want to be low cost provider, I'll put that there. I'll take all of those words in that diagram. Then I will create the 4 perspectives of the strategy map, bottom and top. And profitable growth is in the financial perspectives. And I can put each of them into the other 4 perspectives. Then we can identify the key performance indicators. So look how simple that was, very creative by that individual. Now, what this diagram is explaining is a shift in the way consultants have been implementing the strategy map and balanced scorecard in the last several years compared to in the past. First, let me just say, in the past, what would happen is the executives would get in a room and they would do the whole thing themselves. But in this example, I want to show you that I have 2 rows, the executive team and the managers and employees. And the question is, who is responsible for what? Now, the columns, each of those columns were in those boxes, those squares previously in my previous slides, the strategic objectives. So the very first box, the column, the strategic objective, that must be defined by the executive team. Remember, that's their job. But here's where the shift has changed in the last few years. The second step is to identify what are the few and manageable projects that can be accomplished or the core process to basically satisfy the objective. Here we delegate that to the managers and employees. Let them do it, not the executives. And then after they've done that, let the managers and employees define what should be the key performance indicators, not the executives. Now, after the managers and employees have done that, now we get to the target, because we always want to put targets on KPIs. Think of it like the carrot in front of the mule or donkey. That's how we basically align people, because they want to basically meet the targets of their KPIs. Now, after the managers and employees do that, yes, it can be reviewed with the executives and they can tweak or change them a little bit, but there's a reason this is a better way to go. And it's for 2 reasons. One, if the managers and employees have to identify the projects and initiatives and the KPIs, guess what? They must understand the strategy. And that solves that problem of 15 employees in the hallway who could not explain or articulate the executive team strategy. But there's a second reason to do this. Remember my second of the 8 forces, increased accountability? We're going to hold these managers, employees accountable. But if they don't believe in the KPIs, if the KPIs were strictly defined by the executives without the manager's involvement, then they're going to basically be suspicious or not have faith in it. This way, by having the managers identify them, they're going to have buy-in. We call it, they have to sleep in their own bed. They're the ones that defined the KPIs. Now they should live with it. A scorecard is much more of a social tool than a technical tool. And as I basically said, well, let me just say, every year, I find that every year I get older, I realize how much I underestimate the importance of change management and behavior modification. Resistance to change by employees and managers is big. We've got to learn how to basically get buy-in from them. Now, strategy is not static. Strategy is dynamic. And so what I want to show you with this diagram is as the executives change strategy, it's not a straight, narrow road, it's a winding road. They're basically going to shift things. Now, the way this diagram looks is you see the little employees at the bottom. If the KPIs are basically cascaded down lower into the organization, and they can see the KPI performance against targets further up, they have line of sight. They can answer, what is it that I do and how does it contribute to the success of our organization? But now let's look at the top, the X, Y, and Z. Let's say that's the senior executives' KPIs from the board of directors, maybe grow market share, increase profitability. When they shift the strategy, notice what I just did. It's the same X, Y, and Z, but in some cases we have coefficients. These are weightings. It's no longer the past, it's now 50, 40, 10. But the next level down, now we're talking the line managers, marketing, operations, selling. Look at the big one in the middle, the E, F, and G. When the executives shifted the strategy, look what happened. It's now E, F, and Q. It doesn't mean that G is no longer an important KPI. It's just Q is more important. So this way, it's like navigating the ship. It's like the steering wheel in your car. As the strategy must be modified, we change the KPIs, and then we shift the car in the direction to go. So a way to think about the balanced scorecard is imagine if every employee in the organization, every single day, could answer this single question. How am I doing on what is important? How am I doing on what is important? Well, the first half of the question is easily answered. Why? Because when they turn on their computer in the morning, they may have 3 KPIs. They can see is the dial favorable or unfavorable to the target set by the executives. The real challenge is the second half of this question on what is important, which is the challenge of how do you select the proper key performance indicators. And I'll describe some tips and techniques to do that. The strategy map and the balanced scorecard provides this answer. The overriding purpose of a strategy map and balanced scorecard system is to make the mission and strategy of the executives everyone's job. It's almost like making owners and shareholders of the employees. But now here comes one of the problems organizations have faced with the balanced scorecard. When I was with SAS, we had a balanced scorecard strategy map tool, and I'm involved with many of the other software vendors, SAP, Oracle, financial planning analysis. I've been retired for partly retired for 8 years. When I ask people, how many KPIs do you have in your balanced scorecard? Some of them will say, we have 200. And I'll say, 200 KPIs, that's wonderful, that's outstanding. But how can they all be a K? How can they all be a key performance indicator? You can have 200 of them. So what I want to differentiate now is the difference between KPIs and what I would call OPIs. I should put the operating performance indicators. And I'm going to go through this quickly, but there is a 10-page article. And if you go to this link, when you you can read the article. This is the diagram in the article. The difference between KPIs and OPIs. They're all measurements. They're all important, but they just serve different purposes. Let's start at the top. The KPIs are strategic, so they should be displayed in the balanced scorecard with the strategy map. In contrast, the operational PIs, they're not strategic, but they're process-based, and they can just be displayed in dashboards, like the dashboard in your automobile, because dashboards don't necessarily have interconnection. The definition of a KPI is this: monitoring the progress of accomplishing the strategic objective. I'll repeat that. Monitoring the progress of accomplishing the strategic objective. It's for strategy management, strategy execution. In contrast, the definition of an operating performance indicator is measuring a process. So, other differences. KPIs must have targets. If they do not have a target, they do not yet qualify as a KPI. But in contrast, although operating KPIs can have targets, they do not necessarily have to. They could be for trend analysis or upper bound, lower bound threshold alerts. Next differentiator, frequency of reporting. Monthly, we're strategic. Once we start getting to weekly or daily, we're no longer in the land of strategic, we're in the land of operational. Next requirement, the KPI should be derived from the strategy diagram. Derived, meaning you start with the strategy diagram and then you define the KPIs from it. Now you notice I did not use the word strategy map. I use the strategy diagram. This is because some organizations don't fully use the Kaplan Norton 4 perspectives. For example, some of the chemical companies, like in the United States, they'll have a fifth perspective, like employee safety and health, that kind of thing. But at least they should be derived and customized like a men's suit of clothes or a woman's suit of clothes. Next, all strategy maps, balanced scorecard should have two types of KPIs, project-based and process-based. But when I ask employees or people with balanced scorecard, how many of your KPIs are project-based, they look at me like I'm from the moon. They don't know what I'm talking about. All of their KPIs, if you will, are process-based. And they're, non-financial metrics like on-time delivery of systems, quality metrics, customer satisfaction metrics. The reason you need project-based KPIs, and examples of these would be percentage of completion of a project or number of milestones in a project, is because remember, strategy is about change. Strategy is not about doing the same things over and over again a little bit better. And the way you get change is with projects. They have beginning and ends. And then finally, a problem that I talked about in one of my earlier ICMA Sri Lanka webinars is the budget is typically disconnected from the strategy. And basically what we do is we connect it to the strategy by basically giving those targets to the line managers and have them accomplish the KPIs in the targets. Now, I may have interested some of you, and I think maybe we should implement the strategy map and balanced scorecard in our organization. Or if you're a CPA firm or a consultant, to do this for one of your clients. And incidentally, if you are with the CPA firm with clients or a consultant, I highly encourage you, send me a direct email, because I want to share with you how I have been helping accounting firms and consulting firms implement these methods so they can implement them for their clients. I remember I'm 72. I'm not interested in doing long consulting projects, but I want to do knowledge transfer of my experience. So here is an example of how to implement strategy map very quickly. And it's based on basically that managers learn by doing. And the premise is how I do this is what I call a fast start. It's a one-day workshop. And I basically use the method of, you may have heard of strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. SWOT is the acronym. And what I do is the night before the workshop, and in the first workshop, I only have the executive team, the vice presidents. The night before, I say, please fill out 20 yellow Post-its with a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat, and bring them in. And in the morning, we will then work with them. So now there are 3 photographs. Put your eyes on the photograph to the left. What I do is the first thing in the morning after we meet and greet, as I say, take your yellow Post-its. And now you may notice I have now the strategy perspectives. The 4 are now left to right, not bottom to top. And I say, please put each of your yellow Post-its into one of those 4 perspectives: learning and growth, or process, or customer, or financial. It took them about 15 minutes. You can see all of those yellow Post-its. Now look at the middle photograph. Now I asked them for the next 45 minutes without talking to each other. Look at what was written by the other executives on their Post-its and move them, because these are stickies. You can take them off the wall and put them in another place. Move them to others that are similar and look at the result. 45 minutes later, there are clusters, 2, 3, or 4 clusters within each of the 4 perspectives. And then what we do is we look at cluster by cluster and say, how would I define this as a strategic objective? It's like, okay, penetrate other international countries, or purchase mailing list software so we can basically do marketing lead generation, whatever. And you can probably see there's now, looks like there's about a dozen white sheets of paper. What we've done now is we've defined a strategic objective for each perspective. Now look at the third picture to the right. The next 5 hours, and you can see I'm in that room with 6 or 7 executives. The next 5 hours is one by one perspective or strategic objective. Ask them what would be a project or initiative or a process to improve to accomplish that objective. That takes about 10 or 15 minutes. And then what would be an example of 1 or 2 key performance indicators that you could put a target on, and we could monitor the organization's progress towards accomplishing the strategic objectives. So now we're to about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We've really spent the day in the workshop. They have now built a strategy map and balanced scorecard with KPIs for their organization. Now comes the next step. I ask them, what do you want to do next? You have 2 choices. You got 2 paths in the road. One path is you come into this room tomorrow and do this more slowly, take your time, get it more right, because I'm leaving. I already did it in 1 day. Or the next alternative is you delegate the strategic objectives to your line managers, and you give them 1 week, give them time for them to identify the projects and initiatives and for them to identify the KPIs, and then have them come back a week later in the room and present to you what they came up with. Do you see what that accomplished? We've now got the ownership and buy-in from the line managers, but more importantly, they'll understand the strategy because you gave them the strategic objectives. So that is a fast way. Now, typically when I am doing a all-day workshop, this is just 90 minutes, and I've been doing these for United States CPA societies, many states. I give them an exercise which you don't have time to do because I'm going to proceed. But what I do is I give them this blank strategy map, and I ask them in the room, fill out 2, 3, or 4 strategic objectives. It takes them about 20 minutes, and then we have discussions about it so I can give them immediate feedback. Unfortunately, we can't do that now because this is a webinar. Now, there are some other strategic planning tools. I'm not going to talk about them, maybe a couple of them briefly. This diagram is actually from a task force that I am on with the American Society for Quality. You may want to look at their asq.org. And it's a joint project with the Institute of Management Accountants in the United States. Their website is www.imanet.org. Those of you who have attended my previous webinars for this Sri Lanka, you may know I'm a 30-year member of the IMA. I'm very active on task forces with them. I'm very proud to be told to let you know that their first inaugural Distinguished IMA Member Award of 80,000 members, I was selected as 2. So I've really been a contributor. So you can see in the column of the tool name, the first 2 are what we just described, Balanced Scorecard and the Strategy Map. Another one is SWOT. I can't give you the acronyms stand for, the PEST, PESTLE. Again, you can Google search these. You may recognize the 5, the balance, the Porter's Forces. There's the Baldrige Award. But the next 2 I'm going to talk about in a little more detail. One is called Hoshin-Conry. It's a comprehensive one-page description of an organization's strategies, initiatives, tactics, and KPIs. Again, I know, look at it as a complex diagram. I'm not going to walk you through it, but at your leisure, do a website search or a Google search on Hoshin-Conry, and you can look at this in more detail. Another one is called the Business Strategy Canvas. It's also called the Blue Ocean Theory. This enables the organization to graphically capture in one simple picture the current landscape. Again, I don't have time. I'm not going to take the time to describe it, but it's a very increasingly popular tool for strategy management, strategy execution. So now let me sort of bring it all back together, the big picture. How does this all fit together? And those of you who attended my previous 3 webinars for the ICMA Sri Lanka, and I believe, Lakshman, you don't have to answer, I believe they've been archived so people can go back and watch them. This is the diagram that I described. Briefly, think of this like your heart and bloodstream, the circulatory system, okay? The big blue box in the middle is your organization's resources, meaning your employees, your managers, your machines, your hardware, your assets, okay? The goal here of corporate performance management is how to connect customers to shareholders and owners. If you remember, number 5 of my 8 forces, I described as, poor customer value management. The idea is, how do I connect customers to answer the questions, which types of customers? Well, to shareholders. How does the diagram work? Oh, before I go, where does management accounting and analytics fit into the diagram? I didn't put it there because it's everywhere. The output of management accounting and business analytics, like regression and correlation from the data scientists, is the input to every part of this diagram. Okay, how does the diagram work? We start with the strategy and mission will be formulated and defined based on the needs of the customers by the executive team. Now, I know some of you have MBAs and well, what about Michael Porter's 5 forces, all that? That's fine. I'm more trying to keep this simple. After the executives have formulated and defined the strategy in a map, they communicate it they communicate it with the scorecards and the dashboards. And then we have the feedback. Remember my message, what if every single day, every employee could answer the question, how am I doing on what is important? Well, if they can do by looking at their dials, is it favorable or unfavorable to the target? But if every employee can answer that question, then we can say, how are we doing on basically strategy management? So those 3 arrows, that left side of the diagram was really this presentation. Now comes the targeting, which was my previous webinar for ICMS on measuring and managing customer profitability. The message there briefly was that the CFO and the accounting department needs to basically provide for the sales and marketing team a profit and loss statement for each customer. It does involve activity-based costing techniques. That way, sales and marketing can answer these questions. What type of customer? is basically attractive, to retain, to grow, to win back, to acquire, and which type of customers are not attractive. And then the next question, for the ones that are attractive to do this, how much should we optimally spend with price discounts, marketing deals, offers, coupons? The CFO in the accounting department has an important role to basically much better serve the marketing and sales department, because their job is to connect customer value creation to shareholder creation. But again, most CFOs and accounting departments are not doing this. They're stopping at the gross product profit margin line. And then when they do that, they're butter spreading the overhead, so the product's costs are misleading and flawed. And then they're not going below the gross profit margin line to include distribution expenses, marketing expenses, selling expenses. Next comes the process management. Again, now this is that world of the ERP processes, the business process management, lean management, Six Sigma, cycle time reduction, quality improvement. The operating people pretty much are not as involved with the strategic part, but they still basically have to improve the cost, lower the cost. But you cannot cut cost to prosperity. You have to have both strategic information and operational information. And when this is all done, we realize that, look, at shareholder wealth creation is not really the ultimate goal, it's the result of doing all of this. And now I hope the Zoom technology is working on your end. If it is, you are seeing white bubbles flowing through the veins. Think of them. Remember, my analogy is CPM is like the circulatory system, like your heart, and your blood flows through the veins. But what happens if any of these veins is constricted, narrowed? I use the medical term arteriosclerosis of the CPM, like a heart attack. If any of those veins are restricted, then the money is not going to get to the shareholders. It's going to leak into the sewer. It's going to be wasted, okay? And so if we've got inefficient processes in the process, then it basically isn't, we didn't improve it. It didn't go to the shareholder. Low quality, targeting the wrong types of customers, pricing badly. You get the idea. Now, my belief is the role of the best executives is ones who will basically know which of these veins needs to be widened, which ones are restricted. So if based on these questions, if the employees don't understand the strategy, then let's do the strategy map. If we don't know where we're making or losing money, we don't know which products are more or less profitable, we don't know which customers are more or less profitable, then do that. The CRM stands for customer relationship management. Do the management accounting. If our processes are inefficient, then do lean management. It's really up to them. But my point is, don't do these over the course of 2 or 3 years. Use the rapid prototyping methods that I advocate. Start small, think big, implement these, in like 2 or 3 or 4 months. They don't need to be perfect. This is important. And let me make another point unrelated to this topic, but I'll make it now. I believe in the past, the best leaders and best executives had the best answers. Today, I do not think that is the case. Today, I think the best leaders and best executives have the best questions. There is too much volatility. There's too much uncertainty. There's too much, if you will, noise for those executives to rely on their intuition or gut feel, or sixth sense, or the types of answers they provided earlier in their career that got them promoted to the executive positions they're in now. The best executives need to create a culture of investigation and discovery and tolerance for making mistakes, as long as you learn from the mistakes, and how to delegate to employee teams and managers the type of information I've described here. So to start summarizing, I believe what's happening in all organizations is there has been a shift in the source of return on investment from tangible assets to intangible assets. What I mean by that is there's been a shift from the return on investment from tangible assets like machines or trucks or computer hardware or software to an intangible asset like information. And you'll note in this diagram that the return on investment from information increases left to right exponentially as you go from data to information to knowledge to insights to decisions. The problem is many organizations, maybe even including the organization you work for, are stuck in only the first two red bubbles. All you have is raw data and standard reports, like from your ERP system. All you and your colleagues can answer is this question: what happened? Now, in some cases, the chief information officer or the IT director may give some managers what are called drill down software, business intelligence software. Examples are Click, Tableau, Microsoft Power BI, SAS My Employer. You know, that allows managers maybe to drill down to a line item of an invoice or purchase order where there's an unusual anomaly. But they're still restricted to only answering what happened. The corporate performance management methods begin at the first blue bubble, including strategy map and balanced scorecard. They start with descriptive modeling of the past. A strategy map arguably is a model on a single page. In my previous webinars, you heard me describe that cost accounting is modeling. It's not T accounts and journal entries. You're modeling how resource expenses are traced on a cause and effect into cost. The expenses are traced into cost: product cost, service cost, channel cost, customer cost. It's modeling. Now you can not only answer what happened, why did it happen? We get the why because we're using cause and effect principles. Now, the next bubble, the future's coming at us. Now, the predictive modeling, driver-based budgeting, rolling financial forecast, what-if scenario analysis, capital budgeting, investment analysis. The future's coming at us. Again, this is now the predictive view. When descriptive view, we're looking through the rear view mirror of the car. The predictive view, we're looking through the windshield. Now, there, we not only can answer what happened, why did it happen? It's what can happen. What are all the choices? What are all our options? We can do sensitivity analysis. Then when we get to the top bubble, I call this Mount Everest, nicknamed prescriptive analytics. It's really optimization. Once we're there, it's like all the choices we could make, what is the best choice? That may even involve sophisticated statistical tools like linear programming. So I want to conclude, and then Lakshman will have the debrief from the other guests. This is my big frustration. Why has the adoption rate for the corporate performance management methods, including the balanced scorecard and strategy map, been so slow? What are the barriers? And there are three broad ones. One are technical barriers. They do include information technology issues. One example might be what we call dirty data, low quality data. People entered the wrong information. In the old days, it was a key punch error on a punch card. The older people in the room will remember IBM deck cards. But the IT have a tool to fix that. It's called extraction, transform, and load, ETL. Think of it like an app. Other IT issues, if you're a larger company, you may have different hardware vendors. You've got Hewlett Packard, you've got Dell, you've got IBM. IT can solve that. The next barrier is this perception barrier of excess complexity and affordability. Many of you, even with this presentation, may have thought, well, this strategy map just seems too complicated, and I don't know if the payback will be there. But I showed you it can be built in one day. Those of you who have attended my previous ICMA Sri Lanka presentations, I showed you how activity-based costing system can be implemented in 3 weeks, where most of you believe, oh, it'll take 6 months, it'll be huge, it'll be complex, every employee have to fill out a timesheet, it'll have 3,000 activities. And I showed you that none of those apply. It can be simpler, done more quickly, and you'll get 95% accuracy, good enough. It doesn't have to be perfect. But the big problem has got nothing to do with methods, nothing to do with software, nothing to do with technology. It's all about people. It's organizational behavior barriers, involves resistance to change, culture, and leadership. And what do I mean by that? I mean resistance to change. It's human nature. People like the status quo. Only babies like change of diapers. Other issues, fear of others knowing the truth. Oh, I don't want another department in my organization to know the truth. Oh, I don't want them to know that I'm underperforming on my KPIs. Oh, I don't want them to know that my product is not the most profitable, it's less profitable. Other barriers, fear of being held accountable, fear of being measured. Oh, I don't want them to be looking at me. I don't want them to see me. And then finally, weak leadership. And there I said it. You know, not every organization's executives have the highest IQs. And I know some of you are executives listening to me and you're asking, Gary, are you talking about me? But what my general point on number 3 is, it's not systems, it's not software, it's not technology. You've got to get skilled in change management. How do I get buy-in from people? So I conclude with what I call the complete vision of corporate performance management, including strategy map. You'll notice the book cover on the left. That was one of my earliest books. It has these gears, greasy, grimy gears. And in that case, let's say some of the teeth are broken on the gears, or some of them are disengaged from each other, or someone threw sand into those gears. Okay, if we put that in our automobile engine, the car would run, but our fuel efficiency would be low. Now look at the titanium, the picture on the right, titanium gears, lubricated, digitized, moving at revolutions per minute faster, better, faster, cheaper, smarter, using strategy map balanced scorecard, safer using risk management. That's the full vision. And now put that into the titanium gears into your engine of your car. What's your fuel efficiency? Much higher. Now replace the analogy of fuel efficiency with rate of shareholder and owner wealth. That's where you want to go. So last slide, action steps. Get educated. Thank you very much. You're doing that by listening to this webinar. Get buy-in from your managers. Rapid prototyping, these workshops, start small, think big. I'm not an expert on motivational theory. I just know it's important. And the resources, when you get these slides, I think even in a PDF, you can click on them and there are 3 articles. Your success depends on how well and how fast the right information, intelligence gets to the right people. So there's my email address if you want to ask me questions directly if we can't get to them. My website has many of these articles. And so, Lakshman, we have now some time left over for the review from some of the executives that attended this, and then some Q&A. So I hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Gary. Are you going to take off the presentation or you want to keep it on?
I just did stop share.
Okay. Fine, right. Okay, I think you can see everyone who is there. So let me thank you, Gary. I think it was a very, very excellent presentation. Of course, the balanced scorecard was given in very, very detail, and of course, the key thing of the performance management. And then, of course, the importance of the people, the organization behavior, resistance to change. I think that's a key area in anything. And of course, the culture and leadership. So I don't want to go more in detail, but as I told you, we have 2 of our special guests today. One is Dr. Callum, the Director of the Postgraduate Institute of Management, and also I have Mr. Suresh Dimel, the Chairman of the Export Development Board. So I will now ask Dr. Callum to give his expert comments. Dr. Callum, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor, and thank you very much, Gary, giving an excellent presentation actually related to this strategic mapping and also the balance scorecard. I hope you have demonstrated your knowledge and expertise in this particular area within a very short period in excellent manner, using very simple wording and very simple explanation. I think the audience who gathered here got a very good understanding about how we need to develop our strategic mapping systems into our organization and how we can link them to the our balance scorecard system. So by saying so thank you very much again giving us this opportunity to listen to you in this webinar related to this very important area. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Callum. I think this is really something of great importance. I'm sure you are also teaching this in your business school, and maybe sometime later you might be able to invite Gary for a lecture there.
Yeah, I think that Gary can give us a very good exposure and his experience. He can share with us to develop our strategic plan as well as our balance scorecard for the future of this PIA.
Thank you, Dr. Callum. So we have Mr. Suresh Dimel. He's the chairman of the Export Development Board. I think I'm sure, Suresh, this would have been very, very useful to you. That's something that you can do because you have a massive task, because today our country needs a much needed foreign exchange, and export one area that you need to promote. So maybe I will hand over to you to give your comments on the lecture that was given by Gary.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me, Professor. And Gary, that was an outstanding presentation. I have just been in office for 6 months in a government office. I've been a private sector guy for 30 years and inherited a public position. And the first thing I introduced here was KPIs, because I said that I had to I had to understand what everybody was doing. And I have about 100 employees who are directly under me. And I felt that a KPI was the only way I was going to figure out how they would, I would be introduced to the organization. So I also said that in order for me to have a KPI myself and make a KPI for the organization, I needed to know what all the individual KPIs were. And today I learned that a lot of these KPIs that people are talking about are actually OPIs. And I think that's something I learned today, because key is the factor. And tomorrow I have to talk to my staff, and I've been trying to figure out, because what I was getting was not a KPI. And now I understand how to explain that. So thank you very much. And another favorite part was that a good manager has more questions than answers. And that I think is outstanding. I've not heard that exactly that way before. And I think that's absolutely true today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suresh. Thank you very much. I think, Ruchira, there are a few questions. You like to read them out?
Yes, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, Gary, once again for coming back and also for delivering this excellent presentation. Gary, this is a personal question. I think I have asked this question once also from you. Now, if you take an organization such as Tesco, a multinational organization, that organization is managed by 6 KPIs. Now, most of these KPIs are very simplified KPIs. They have 3 financial KPIs: sales, profit, cash flow, and then customers coming back, getting good recommendation from their employees and also getting good feedback from suppliers. So very simplified, brief KPIs. So my question is, if such a multinational can manage with 6 KPIs, why can't other organizations do the same thing?
Well, first, I'm not comfortable with those 6 KPIs. Those, the majority of them seem to be financial, profit, cash flow, so that's after the fact. Maybe they're not embracing the true principles of the strategy map balanced scorecard. The shift is to non-financial metrics, as I described, and those non-financial metrics, as they're monitored and achieving the targets, the consequence is those 6 KPIs. So I would call those 6, super KPIs.
Super KPIs.
Uber, in Germany, I think they have this word Uber, U-B-E-R, Uber KPIs. So I'm not comfortable. You've got to have, as Suresh just described, he said many of mine are OPIs. Let me just make it clear. They cascade down. All measures are important. You can have, Suresh, you can have 200 OPIs. That's fine. They're all important. It's just, they're not all, purpose of all of them is for accomplishing the strategic objectives.
Correct.
So Ruchira, I'm not sure I'm answering, maybe I'm going to get in trouble because I'm kind of saying, I don't know if it's Tesco or what, it's not like, well, I'm not in agreement, but I suspect that they have a cascading below those big 6.
Maybe, yes,
must be others, but the real traction, when I mean by traction, your gym shoes on the ground so you can run, is coming from the lower level, the cascading down. And then the 6 KPIs you mentioned, that's like the finishing line. Oh, okay, we won the race, but.
Those are like goals. Those are like ultimate goals.
Yes.
Another question, Gary, is about the 5th perspective. Now, as we know, we talk about adding the 5th perspective to the balance scorecard, sustainability aspect. Now, what do you recommend? Adding a 5th perspective to the balance scorecard or integrating sustainability into the 4 perspectives in order to show the cause and effect relationship? What do you think is the best way to go?
Well, I've never thought about that question, but my initial leaning as you were asking it was a 5th perspective. Because the chemical companies have added, safety and health. You in India, well, yeah, you had that huge explosion a few years ago, many, many deaths from the big chemical plant blowing up as an example. And then also the safety of their own employees as an example. So they added a 5th perspective. And the reason I lean towards a 5th perspective for sustainability, which to me is about the people, planet, profits, and we need this because climate change is real. And anybody that's denying it, I don't want to get in political trouble here. And what I like is playing with the Kaplan and Norton strategy map. And, it's like Lego blocks. The Kaplan-Norton 4 perspectives is sort of like, that's their blueprint. But, you can have variations of it. You can deviate from it and get creative, but it still will always have the same principles of bottom to top alignment of people's choices, behavior, priorities with the ultimate strategy. And that ultimate strategy is where you would include sustainability, stakeholder, not just shareholder wealth creation, but stakeholder, and in sidebar, I have been reading the paper in Sri Lanka. I know many of you are not from Sri Lanka, about this incredible disaster of this ship out in the sea leaking oil with all the plastic pollution, all the birds and animal and fish that are dying. We can't have this.
Gary, another criticism of balance scorecard is that it is focusing too much on the internal operations of an organization rather than starting from an external view. So what is the best way to address this?
I'm going to be very self-serving. If the readers go to wiley.com, that's the book publisher, www.wiley.com, I just co-authored a book supply chain management, costing, and performance management. It's for, if you will, not just the internal view that you described, the four walls, but amongst trading partners from the supply chain all the way through. So that's my simple answer. Oh, and you don't need to buy the book. If you go to Wiley or Amazon, I think chapter 1 will be a free download, and it'll give you a good enough introduction to not just the internal view, but we call this inter-organizational costing.
There's a question, Gary. It is asking for a diversified organization, what is the best way to start balanced scorecard? Is it to start from the corporate level, or is it to start at the business sector level?
Whoa, another question I have not thought about. My immediate impulsive answer is start at the bottom, customize it. You know, you said diversified, it's a conglomerate. Let's say like in India, Reliance Electric or Reliance Industries, I believe, is a big conglomerate. You know, if I was starting from scratch with them, I would have each of those industries, you know, retail, manufacturing, oil and gas, design their own strategy map. And maybe the top of those, you know, if they're all working together, then the corporate, the umbrella, the conglomerate, it would be satisfied. Think of that analogy like the instruments in an orchestra. You've got the violin strings, you've got the brass with the trombones and the horns, you've got the timpani with the drums, you've got the woodwinds with the clarinet. They all have to play together to make good music. I mean, Beethoven and Mozart didn't say to the symphony, play loud. He said, play together.
Yeah, Gary, this question is about computerized or integrating balance scorecard into the computerized system. So this person is asking if it is possible to integrate it to the monthly reporting system, or maybe to develop BI reports, dashboards, up-to-date information to get information from the system regarding the balance scorecard perspectives.
All of them, I'm going to say yes to all of those. I mean, at this point, it's the responsibility of the information technology department, the chief information officer, the vice president of information technology. You know, they need to extract, that's the word, the transactional data from all of their operating systems. And I know SAP is a big one in India, but you've got Oracle, IBM, many Infor. So you extract, some of it would basically go into the dashboards, the balanced scorecard, you know, which are more than dashboards. Dashboards are independent, isolation, you know, and some of the sophisticated companies, the managers have handheld devices. You know, look at me, I'm holding up, and their dials are, they're looking at those dials on a daily basis.
Yeah, Gary, this is the final question. It is asking whether there should be a balance. I mean, how can you ensure the balance between financial and non-financial measures? Does it depend on the size of the organization, or does it depend on what they do?
Size, people ask me, how large do you need to be for an activity-based costing system for balance? I say 25 employees. I start right there, because a lot of these small companies think, oh, this is for big companies. No, it applies, because there's always complexity and uncertainty, and you still want to align, you know, the behavior. I don't think, you know, and then some people ask the question, I have a balanced scorecard. Is it balanced? How well is it balanced? And I think it's not about where the emphasis is. It's about I think each of those boxes, strategic objectives, again, is like the instruments in the symphony, the woodwinds, the violins, the horns, you know, just as long as each of those is basically chugging along, meeting its target, it'll be balanced.
Yes, those are the questions that have come so far, Gary.
Yeah.
Rajendra, you have to ask anything?
No, I think he's
okay.
outside.
Yeah, okay, bro. Yeah,
okay,
sure.
right. Thank you very much, Ruchira. I think time is also up. So let me thank Gary Cookings because he is the fifth lecture that you are giving to us. I think it has really upgraded the management accounting and the costing and the performance management in all our members and all others who are attending these seminars. And I'm indeed grateful to you for sparing your valuable time. I know it is early morning there, but for us it is maybe evening, but still most of them after work who have come. One important thing that you mentioned, of course, is maybe you have a strategy, but unless you really make it work, then of course the real results will not be there. And I'm sure that the balance scorecard will also show what the performance of everyone is and how they can really achieve this. So most of the matters you said were really more on the practical side. And of course, the importance that you gave for the management accounting profession as people who are involved in the operational work, and as to how the use of the data, because data is there, but you need the information to come in. So I think from our participants should read the books published by Gary, because I think those are really good publications. And as he said, at least the first chapter is available, and thereafter there you can decide about it. But certainly for our library, we are already ordered a few books, but most probably we will get the balance books also, so that it will help our members and of course students in this area. So once again, let me thank you, Gary. And I also must thank our special guest. As I said, we have Dr. Callum, the new director of the Postgraduate Institute of Management. I'm very thankful to him for coming today. And also, he's been closely involved with CMA and for all the support that he has extended to us. I'm sure this seminar would have given him new thoughts, ideas as to how he's going to plan his innings at the PIM, which is really the leading management, the postgraduate management institution in Sri Lanka. So we wish you all the best, Dr. Callum, and I'm sure that this seminar would have given you a lot of new thinking, which you can really use for your success. And of course, Mr. Suresh Nivel is there. He is no stranger to us, someone from the private sector who's gone into the public sector and now having a lot of challenges to meet. So what you have mentioned about the corporate performance and the balance scorecard and the other important areas would really give him new thinking to ensure that his targets that he's planning, especially in this present climate of the COVID-19 pandemic, he is very much in demand because we need the foreign exchange. So I think he will be able to really make use of what we have done. So I must also thank our council members, Mr. Ujir Pereira, who was able to do the questions and answers and give it to you, and of course Mr. Gajendra also for his presence. So, and also all our participants, because going through the list, I find that they are very senior, maybe finance directors, finance managers, and also others who have been participating. So let me thank all of them for their participation, and I'm sure that all of you all have gained quite a lot from this valuable seminar and the presentation made by Gary Cookings. We will make available his presentation and the video, and Ms. Shanti, who's been really behind the whole thing and organizing it, will be sending it. So once again, Gary, let me thank you a lot, because we are also very proud that you are one of our members. So we can say that we have one of the most eminent people in the management accounting profession who is a member of CMA Sri Lanka. So let me once again thank you, and I wish you all the very best, and hope that we can maybe keep in touch with you, and maybe when we plan our conference, you will be there to address it. Thank you very much.
Lakshman, thank you. May I ask a favor? Can you copy and paste all of the chat? All of the chat messages, put it in a Word document and send it to me. Thank you very much. Okay. It's a privilege to present.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much to all the best. Thanks,
Thank you, Professor. Thank
Dr.
you, Dr.
Kaloma. Thank you, Suresh.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Mr. Suresh. Thank you, Gajendra.
thanks, Ruchira and Gaji. Okay. Okay, thank you. Then we will end the seminar and thank all our participants and all our special guests for their presence. Thank you, Gary.